AI is often talked about in terms of speed, scale, and productivity. But some of the most important work happening right now is about restoring something far more human: the ability to communicate, to interact, and to have control.
But I still believed in the fact that everybody should be able to have that voice.
Thorsten Stremlau from NVIDIA is building systems that use AI to give people those capabilities back.
AI for good for me is really to have everybody, regardless of their disability, regardless of their ability to participate in normal activities, be able to leverage AI in order to be able to thrive.
This is Forging the Future. Welcome to Forging the Future, and I'm here today with Thorsten Stremlau, who is the System Principal Architect at NVIDIA and a good longtime friend of mine. Hey, Thorsten.
Hey, Chris.
I think this is going to be a fun conversation. We're here talking about AI and AI for good, but let's talk a little bit in general first about where you think we're at in the AI lifecycle.
Oh boy. That's a
You just start
really, really
off with
good
an easy
question.
question.
I still think that we're barely scratching the surface of where we can go. I think probably if we were to talk in car terms, we'd probably be around a little bit beyond the Ford Model T, in terms of making a mass market car, but we're most definitely not yet much beyond that. There's so much more that we can do and we can discover. And we're discovering every day.
Scratching the surface. Early
Yep.
days, right? Well,
Yep.
probably both of us have heard about AI for decades, right? So, but now it does feel a lot more real than it was even 5 years ago, right? And but still, we're very early in the life cycle.
If I stay with the example of the Ford Model T, right? It's kind of like, yes, there were cars before the Ford Model T. There were tons of different cars, and obviously including some German cars. I had to plug that, but they weren't mass produced and they weren't available to the masses and they weren't really accessible. And that's one of those things that's just changed within the last couple of years. Is that really it has now become accessible to the mass market. And so that's why we're seeing a lot more adoption and optimization.
Well, what's curious to me, further your car analogy, is that I saw a video of like Phyllis Diller, who was a well, probably most people don't know who she is anymore, but she was an actress, right? And she was driving an EV back in the early 1900s, right? And so there were electric vehicles back then. It's just that the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engine, you know, essentially took over at some point. So we don't really know where things are going to be exactly 100 years from now, but it's, I think, a great time to be alive. So we're early days in AI, but what do you think is misunderstood about deploying AI at scale right now?
A lot of companies are misunderstanding the value proposition that they can get out of AI. A lot of companies are thinking about AI as a replacement. Really the way that they should all be seeing this is, it's a productivity game, right? And again, I love using old analogies, but it's taking us out of the time where typewriters and having to be able to type and use the little chalk and erasers in order to make up your mistakes, and we're moving into the word processing phase. Right now it's something that now everybody is able to type really, really nice letters. Same kind of thing, but it just makes everyone more productive. And I think that's one of the things that's the most misunderstood.
Mm.
Is AI should be used as a tool for good, as a tool for productivity, rather than as a replacement tool. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I think even for myself, I mean, it's just overwhelming, the pace that AI is on right now and trying to keep up. And every day you're reading about something new, whether that's Claude or, Gemini or Copilot or OpenClaw or NemoClaw or DGX Spark or whatever, and it's really hard to know like where do you start? What would you recommend if you're someone that hasn't really gotten involved much in it yet? Where would you actually start trying to get up to speed on AI right now?
It's not that much different, and then I'll use the example, and Chris, probably with you too. Your parents, right? Remember when they first time was they got a smartphone? I mean, what a nightmare, right? What an incredible nightmare. And they were so timid, and it was like, oh, if I touch this, what do I break? Right? And it's, at least that was me. And then for the next 6 months, it was like immediate technical support every single time the screen went off. And I think that's exactly where we are as well right now. There's a lot of misconceptions. It's also been brought about by movies and all the evil things that AI does. And the one recommendation that I can have is just look at it for whatever job you're doing. And I really don't mean AI is not just there for the programmer or whatever else is there. I'm seeing AI applications in blue collar jobs, in white collar jobs, in all sorts of other jobs, and it's having the same kind of impact regardless.
Right. Yeah, just get started, in other words, right? And don't be afraid it's going to take over your computer and upload all your bank account information.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think my approach has been to use, what tools are immediately available, right? Like if you do have Gemini or something, make sure you turn it on and take meeting notes. Or, if you've got some Word doc and you want some analysis, maybe feed that into, ChatGPT if you have it. I've been using Perplexity a lot. I had it recently compare some documents and, tell me what changed between these two contracts. Or in general, I'm using it for, instead of Google search, right? And doing a little bit deeper research about practically anything, right? But that's just scratching the surface of what you can do with
Well,
AI.
I have to say is I think Chris, you're actually being more productive than I am because so I can tell you this weekend, I drove to Denver, and I was using it to find restaurants to tell me what good camping spots there were, what hotels I could stay overnight at that weren't going to, basically take the tires off of my Jeep and leave it there, just a security stuff. I'm using it just even in personal life, all around is even for little things like camping, shopping. Oh, and very, very important, coming up with new cocktail recipes that haven't been tried before.
Really? You're having it mix drinks for you?
Again, something that you could do is, you go in, and by the way, I have tried this. It didn't work really well. I basically took a picture of my liquor cabinet, and then I said, all right, using at least two of these ingredients, plus either Coke or whatever else, or the other stuff, is come up with a tasty cocktail. And by the way, yeah, it came. And I did say, because my wife is Irish, I did say is give it an Irish theme, and I have to say is it did a really really good job, really really good job.
And what are you using mainly when you're sending those prompts?
I'll, I'll just experiment. Sometimes I'll use Gemini, sometimes I'll use Copilot. For the less important things, it's an experimentation to see, and sometimes, by the way, I may use the multiple ones for the same query, right? Just to figure out which one does a better job.
Yeah. But you've gone deeper. You're actually using it for development now, right? I mean, so you're using, I think, the DGX Spark.
Yeah, I know. It was sorry, that was a little bit in as a joke. I know, obviously, actually, just right now, if I take a look at this setup, I think I've got about six different screens that are running concurrently on my PC right now that are actively developing code as we're speaking for an NVIDIA project that I'm working on.
Nice. So you're multitasking. How do I know I'm talking to you and not your AI agent, though? So it's like,
Well, interesting. Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of initiatives and even like patents that have been filed now around that. Have you seen that video of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio fighting on a rooftop?
oh, I
Right?
did see that. Yeah.
Right? It never happened. They've got dialogue. They talk to one another. They're it's like a Matrix kind of thing. Never happened. And by the way, I mean the artist that created it, he did very much say so that he was trying to show exactly what the impact is. And that really rattled the industry as well, is making sure that how do you protect somebody's real identity, right? That is something that is becoming more and more important. And this is actually where some of the paranoia should kick in, right? So it really only takes about 20 to 30 seconds of your voice recording for me to be able to recreate your voice. Now, with that amount of time, you'll never be able to, or I'll never be able to use your voice to convince your loved ones or the people that are close to you that it's you. But you
Yet.
know, uh, one of your employees, one of the acquaintances that you occasionally meet, yeah, I could ask them to transfer me $10,000. Probably not going to work, but that is one of the dangers that is coming in.
Well, we've seen that happen already. I mean, I've seen people use video of me to try to do something like that without AI. So I'm sure that it's going to come now with AI, and it is getting more and more convincing. I think we have crossed the uncanny valley, right? Which was what they used to call, hey, that doesn't quite look real. There's something weird about that. It looks like mannequins talking. But if you see the progression, I think, of Will Smith eating spaghetti, have you seen that series where in the beginning it was just obviously fake, and now they've shown it like each year now, and now he's eating spaghetti with his son, and you cannot tell.
Yep.
They're sitting there with the conversation. You cannot tell that it's not him. You really can't. There's probably going to be a whole new crop of tools that are somehow going to help protect us, hopefully protect us from, what people are coming at us with. So that's all the fun side of, AI, right? Creating videos, creating audio, doing, research, doing generation. Tell us a little bit about what you're using AI for and what you're calling AI for good. How did that become part of your focus?
From an early age, I got pulled into a group of like youth support for people with communications disabilities and all sorts of other things like it. Back then, the diagnosis wasn't really as far along as it is yet today, right? It was like, nonverbal autism, for example. It was just somebody who didn't speak, right? That was basically it. I'm showing my age. I think you can tell by the gray in my beard. I realized that really every single one of them still had a lot to contribute, and each of them was a person. They just didn't know how to, or they couldn't communicate in the same way. And then, oh boy, I can't even tell you how many years ago I got pulled into a project just purely by chance, through Professor Hawking, Stephen Hawking. Um, he he was looking for a new laptop to mount to his wheelchair, and to replace some of the electronic components that were basically underneath his wheelchair and had been for many years. So if you remember back to Hawking, you'll remember his voice actually sucked. It wasn't that great, right?
It became
But
part of his personality at some point,
that's
essentially. Yeah.
exactly it. And that was exactly it. He'd lost his voice so early on that voice now became his personality. And by the way, he protected that fiercely. In that, as part of that project, we tried to change it. We tried to make it better, and he refused. He made us go back to exactly the way he said. No, this is me. This is the way that everybody recognizes me. Make sure that I'm there. And that's how I got pulled in, and really started understanding, if I obviously a great thinker like Stephen Hawking, who's basically revolutionized so many areas of mathematics and physics and everything else like that. That's one thing, but I still believed in the fact that everybody should be able to have that voice, and so that was always one of those things that we wanted to work on. And by the way, I want to be very, very clear. There wasn't much AI that was part of Stephen Hawking's solution. Stephen had a sensor in his glasses that monitored his cheek movement, right? Which, I mean, and then basically there was a cursor that moved across the screen, and then when he when he twitched his cheek, it would stop at a particular point, a letter, a word, or whatever else, and then he would select it, and then that's basically how he. Now, I do have to say is he was absolutely fantastic in the amount of words that he could write. He wrote entire books, by the way, using his cheek. Okay,
That's crazy.
um, but then as technology evolved and more AI came in, and we were able to do really, really good eye gaze detection, and be able to extrapolate that. The solution became a lot more accessible, and that's basically what brought me to it. I realized that with my limited skills and with my limited access to stuff, I could give so much to so many people that are currently not able to participate in normal life and not thrive. And that's basically what I wanted to do.
What did you end up changing for him then?
For Professor Hawking, not much.
Mm.
Really, not much. He was perfectly happy with the way that he had. I mean, as I said, he wrote entire books, but Professor Hawking was unique. He still had movement, for a very, very long time. Chris, and the average after diagnosis, the average lifetime of somebody who's been diagnosed with ALS is less than 5 years, right? So that was something that was atypical. But and again, by the way, I'm talk to you a little bit about the motivation. Most people don't die of actual. They die because of the depression. They die because they're locked in. They die because they can't communicate, right? And that's one of those drivers. And again, I know I can change that, and that's basically what drove me.
Mm. That was your motivation. And
Yep.
so, and you can see that once you've unlocked that, there's a change in those patients, right?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, there's still a lot of complications, right? And by the way, I want to be very, very clear. This doesn't just apply to patients with ALS. My wife, for a short time, had a paralyzed vocal cord. Try that, by the way. I'm gonna just joke here, but it was great for me because my wife couldn't really counter anything that I said. No, I'm kidding.
She agreed with everything you said for a while, right?
That's right. It was like but it was also. By the way, it's also frustrating. When you call down from upstairs, like, "Honey, are you ready?" Blah blah blah, and then there's no answer,
Mm.
right? But it's really giving accessibility to everyone that has communications difficulties. That was the thing that I set out to try to solve.
Interesting. Yeah, one project that we did and continue to do for Disney, this was 15 or more years ago, but we still implement the solution, was assisted technology for people that had low sight or were blind or low hearing or deaf, so that they could go and experience the theme parks in as close of a way as you and I could, for example. So it provided amplified audio or closed captioning or descriptive narration for the blind. And so I'm pretty excited that, first of all, to be able to help people enjoy theme parks like that through technology. And then we went and installed it to over 50 national parks across the United States. But this takes things to a whole new level, right? So maybe talk a little bit more about the solution exactly. So you're using AI to do what to help an ALS patient?
I need to step back a little bit. So, unfortunately, again, after Stephen Hawking passed away, that was kind of like it was a sad moment. It was a break, and then out of the blue, I was approached by another professor, Dr. Peter Scott Morgan, who, in his right, by the way, just beyond what is very, very unique in all sorts of different areas. Now, he was a robotics professor out of the UK who was also suffering from ALS. But his view was completely different. He embraced becoming a human cyborg. He was one of the first people to actually have a tracheotomy, a proactive tracheotomy, and he had to fight the UK healthcare system in order to be able to get that, right? Because, by the way, again, a lot of ALS patients get lung infections because they ingest food or spit the wrong way, right? It goes into their lungs. So he fought for so many different things, and his view was, I'm going to embrace this. And he had a whole bunch of things that he wanted. He wanted to really thrive. He wanted to be able to communicate. He wanted to be able to be autonomous in his wheelchair. He wanted to be able to still create art. That was also something that he wanted, and in his vision really became my vision. And by the way, for a short time, Chris also became part of Softtech's vision, because you guys actually helped us, in my previous role at Lenovo, create some of the gaze interaction code that we were looking to do. Because as time progressed, and by the way, again, with ALS patients, they lose the ability to blink. Now, sounds great. You don't need to blink, but guess what? You need to blink in order for your eyes to actually, get moisture. And so, what happens if you can't blink is your eyes get infected very, very quickly, and they get painful. So we had to put salve in his eyes in order to try to solve that. Well, guess what? That salve interfered with the camera being able to see where he was looking.
Mm.
So that's where, by the way, your team actually came in and helped us on some of those things very, very early on. But he really embraced becoming the human cyborg. And that then basically motivated us, and also motivated me to really become part of the Scott Morgan Foundation, which is his legacy that he left behind.
Yeah, I remember that project. I mean, it's so great to work on those kinds of projects and just, improve someone's ability to, like you said, do art or communicate. But if he was losing the ability to blink and you're starting to lose you can't even like essentially have anything where you could click, right? How is he actually moving a cursor once you solve the vision problem? How are you getting the input then?
One of Peter's big visions was also to make this accessible to as many people as he possibly could. Let me be very clear. There are solutions out in the market today that do the gaze detection, allow somebody to speak, that are 50, 60, $70,000. And Chris, as that's out of reach for most people in the world. And again, also went against what the Scott Morgan Foundation was all about. So we always tried to get to do something that was as low cost as possible. And our goal was actually to get to a point where your smartphone would be able to do that same thing, that you really didn't require any special. And by the way, or the RGB camera that's in your laptop, right? No special $20,000 camera. And unfortunately, that was one of those things that we did see is for the technology at the time, we did then need to go to an upgraded camera, because we had to be able to shine light into the eyes from two different angles in order to still be able to get through that cream that he had to put into his eyes. But it was an evolution, and we also looked at other interfaces, like a brain computer interface that sat behind his ears, or even an interface. And by the way, no, I'm not cleaning my ear. An interface that went into his ear and used the movement of your eardrum in order to be able to interact with the system. And by the way, I encourage anyone that's listening to this right now, that's the little muscle that you use when you're coming down on an airplane and you get that pressure to clear your ears. Just try it. If you hear a click, then you've got that muscle and you can control it really well.
And that's actually, I think you told me earlier, one of the last muscles that you lose control of.
Yep, that's right. ALS is really weird. Mm-hmm. ALS is really, really weird in the way that it progresses through a person's body.
But one of the reasons I think some of these systems cost so much, besides maybe needing higher tech, is that, the quantities are so low, right? So if a company is going to go and try to approach a solution to reach this audience, and the audience is small like this, then the costs go way up, right? So how do you address the cost factor? You said you want to make it more accessible to more people, but
it's the cost of the equipment, not actually having as many, it's not as massive a market, but one of the things is healthcare certifications, right? And by the way, I want to be very, very clear. I firmly believe in it, right? Because if we didn't have it, we'd have all sorts of quacks that would be putting, we probably have all sorts of quacks putting medical devices out in the market anyway. Certification is one of those things that helps separate that. And that is one of the cost drivers. But again, the Scott Morgan Foundation and our goal is to make it so that it runs on any device, right? So that we can get to the phone, which, by the way, I'm not kidding, everybody in the world now has a phone, right? If you go to South America, if you go to India, if you go to Africa, regardless of where you go, somebody will, that person will have a phone.
If you are enjoying this conversation, don't miss what's next. Subscribe to Forging the Future at softec.com/FTF, and we'll send you our ultimate guide to Edge AI. Learn how to get started with Edge AI, how Edge AI is reshaping the business landscape, and plus you'll get a checklist to evaluate your Edge AI readiness. Thanks for tuning in, and subscribe now.
They won't typically have a laptop or a workstation or anything else like that, but we also want to be able to scale, right? To be able to provide that to everybody else and those that can get better equipment to then provide better solutions.
Yeah, I think that is a big change. I mean, when I remember assistive technology 10, 15 years ago, step one is, right, oh, you need a computer, right? And the computer, of course, back in those days also was very expensive. And then you're running software on top of that to do screen reading or Jawbreaker, all these kind of solutions, right? But with the phone, which is, of course, it's a supercomputer in your pocket now, you're saying that we can leverage that and use the camera and the audio in order, and using AI on top of that to unlock some of these same features.
And even, Chris, do it locally.
Mm.
Right? Because again, you have to remember, we are fairly spoiled here in the United States with more or less ubiquitous connectivity. But in many of the regions, they may not have the same data plans, or they may not have the same coverage. And so again, it's important that this communications device also works in a disconnected, so it doesn't rely on the cloud.
So does it work now? I mean, so someone would have a phone and somehow position this phone in front of them, and
Yeah.
it's reading
Yep.
eye movements, and then using input to do what? Surf the internet, write a book, or what are they using the solution for?
There are solutions for writing a book. Right now, it is mainly about basic communications. Right?
Mhm.
I'm in pain. I'm hungry. Hello, it's a great day. Take me outside. The basic communications needs. If I want to grow a little bit more, I mean, if I wanted a full blown avatar, then the compute needs also evolve. We're not quite, and this is again, Krista, the very first question that you asked. That Ford Model T did not do 100 miles an hour on the highway. Okay,
Yeah.
it will someday. It will someday, but just not right now.
Hmm. What I'm hearing is that this phone is providing like a screen reader platform, and you're doing a pick and choose, and then the output is like an audio output, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, it's actually goes a lot beyond that. It goes a lot beyond that. And again, we had to rethink. We had to rethink a lot. Number one is we have to rely on just a single RGB camera, like the one that I'm pointing to in front of my screen right now. So there's no fancy, cameras that are far apart that get to look at different eyes. And that has all of its own challenges, right? Because even if you look at my eyes behind my glasses, it's really, really hard to tell where I'm currently looking at, right? And especially if I then squint. We actually leverage some very, very unique NVIDIA IP. We have a great team in NVIDIA that's pioneering in gaze interaction and developing all of the AI algorithms and the training mechanisms in order to get that done. So that was number one. But the thing that was even bigger, really, really amazing. So again, and by the way, just going back to that example, we mentioned the typewriter in the beginning. Okay, now you realize that your keyboard isn't the most productive in terms of what you would be able to use to type. The keyboard layout that you have today was designed in order to stop the arms from sticking when you were typing on a keyboard. They were not designed for being able to type fairly quickly, right? That
They're
that
actually
is, it just
designed to slow
happened to
you
be that
down.
everybody learns how to use it, right?
Mhm.
Well, we could break that paradigm. And so what we actually created, and we had a whole bunch of different users and influencers on this one, is we created a round keyboard because as you're looking at something, this is your middle point, and now your eyes, because they're round, they'll be going, they have the same, they'll always go back to the middle, and then you can look up or down or whatever other different types of directions. I mean, so we actually created a custom circular keyboard that is optimized for gaze interaction to allow somebody to speak quicker. And it has predictive text, right? So obviously it'll remove, just like on your phone when you do the swiping thing, right? When you're using your finger, it'll remove those letters that don't make sense, right? And it'll help you speed up. But that was a huge, huge innovation and a huge new way of moving. And we did, and by the way, as a backup mechanism, so let's say, for example, somebody's now out in the very, very bright sun and that camera fails, but they still need to be able to talk. What we actually did, and this is Peter Scott Morgan actually developed this, is he created an interface that basically just used up, down, left, and right, and middle, and then a combination of, so for example, up, down was yes, and left, right was no, right? But then there was up, down, left, right, and then that was some other command. And so he created a set of commands that could always be used even in an emergency when the closer eye detection, where you need really, really accurate detection, still worked. Again, because he was thinking of even the emergency situation. So yes, it's a lot different. And the text input is then either used in order to generate your custom response, or by the way, it still takes a long time to type. Okay. So we also created an AI that basically takes your emails, your WhatsApp messages, all your interactions, and takes your behavior, your voice, your persona out of it. And so when somebody now asks that user the question, and again the phone is listening, it will transform that person's voice to text, feed it to the AI, and the AI will then attempt to respond in your response. Now, it was important to us that we didn't take away the user's autonomy, and we didn't put the AI in front of the user, but we let the AI be the tool behind the user. And so the way that we programmed the AI was that it would give a positive response. Chris, you asked me, would you like to go outside? Okay. And so the positive response is, yes, it's a great day. It's really sunny, and I'm sick of being stuck in here. Positive. Neutral response is, okay, if you really want to. Okay, that would be positive. And then negative is, no, really, it's too warm outside. There's bugs, and I really don't feel like going outside. Right. So that's it. And if none of those three responses meet what you wanted to answer, Chris, if you were that patient, then we added a fourth selection, which is to custom type it. And again, the AI would learn every single time that you really didn't like that response and you wanted to answer differently.
When you say you put it in the background, what did you mean by that? Because it sounds like you had three responses that were in the foreground, and then the fourth option was a background like, and the whatever you want to say response.
That's a good question, and I'm sorry I wasn't clear. We wanted the person to be in the foreground. We always wanted to give the person the selection, right? So before the AI ever responds, it's the person that selects yes, positive, neutral, negative, or custom.
I see.
The AI never responds on behalf of that person without their input.
There's no auto response. You still have full control of those response types, or whether you want to be custom. That's interesting.
Yes, that's correct. Although I do have to say is there's more than enough Teams meetings that I'm part of where I'd love auto response. It's like
maybe we'll get there. We need something like that besides the thumb up thing that never seems to be really working. It just always goes off on me whenever I'm just talking, waving my hands. But
yep.
So this sounds like a great solution for communication, but where do you take it from there?
I mean, Chris, really this is all about allowing somebody with a communications disability to thrive, right? To be able to, and what we're solving right now is basic communication, as you just said. But, there's more to thriving than just basic communication. My vision here is that eventually you'll be able to just use your eyes in order to be able to play complex video games, right? To be able to scroll through complex web pages and really go and just use your PC or your laptop in the same productive way that somebody that has full motion, has all of their fingers, has all of their arms, has full interactive capabilities in the same way, again, so that they can thrive.
Yeah, I remember actually we did some work. I think it was actually from for Omron, and they did have like a gaze detection API that we ported over to I think it was iOS, and we were using an iPad and tried to create we prototyped a video game that you could use your eyes to control the cursor or the main character in the video game, and so I believe it's 100% possible to get there from what you're talking about. I think with technology, you talked about cost and how much things cost and making it more accessible. And you also see now Neuralink is doing a lot of work with ALS patients as well, but you're having to get a brain implant, right? And I'm assuming that that whole process costs a lot of money. And plus, it's also a lot more dangerous than using your phone.
Let me be very, very clear. There are many areas where the eyes and gaze detection just isn't enough still, right? And again, using your eyes, I painted a rosy picture, but using your eyes it takes a long time to type out what you want to do, right? It's still difficult, especially if you type out your responses individually, to participate in a normal conversation, right? The ones that you and I would have at the bar, right? Now imagine we were sitting at the bar, you ask me a question about whatever is on TV, and by the time I answer, the next play is already on, or there's like 3 goals have been scored, right? And so that's where BCI, really brain computer interfaces and the things like Neuralink and others, paradromics, really comes in, because now I can go directly to the interface. And I mean, I've been playing with that for years. I've been playing with that for years.
How do you
I
play
had a
with a
very
BCI?
early headset where basically I had to put this goop on the end of the receptors, and then attach it to my head. Then for the rest of the day my hair would be full of this goop. And I remember, and Chris, I think you've seen me up on stage a few times, right? I like to do demos that normal people would not do up on stage. And so I had this demo down where if I imagined a red Ferrari really, really, really hard in my mind, I would be able to say yes. And if I then imagined a green frog and I had these pictures, I could be able to say no. And I went up on stage and I was in front of an audience of like 500 people, and it had worked 100% of the time, every single time, up until the moment I got up on stage. And my brain waves were just completely different because of, panic and stage fright and, everything else that went along with it. And guess what? I couldn't get a single yes or no out of this thing, regardless of, I tried Kermit the Frog, I tried just about everything else, did not work. And you know what? And in the end, so that's one of those things, is when we get it to work properly, it'll advance a lot more than where we are today. But you are also right. I would not want somebody to futz with my brain every year to give me an upgrade. That's not something that is sustainable yet.
Yeah, I think it can be a pretty scary thing. I think they either have to come up with a system where they can get you plugged in, but then the smarts can be upgraded without having to have surgery again, but we're probably very far away from that. Or being able to pick up the brain waves without having to have that surgery, right? So
Yep.
basically
Yep.
the
But
mind
there's a
reading
whole bunch of
application.
advances that are happening in that too. It's really, really
Mm,
cool.
mm. So speaking about not wanting to have someone operate on your brain, I mean, what are you thinking about non-invasive BCI? Is that where we're going?
Yeah, we're getting a whole bunch more, specialized interfaces in all sorts of different areas. By the way, and I did mention it. Ear switch is that switch that goes in your ear that has a camera that looks at your little muscle in your ear. We've seen interfaces basically where you use your tongue. So it's just like those dental correction things that a lot of kids, unfortunately my parents never paid for it, but a lot of kids put in their mouths in order to keep their teeth straight. Well, guess what? If you put a sensor in that, you can use that in order to, move your tongue, and you can use it just like you would a touchpad, in order to interface with something. Yes, the evolution of brain computer interfaces is coming along dramatically, right? There are those that are implanted, and those today are the ones that are showing the biggest promise, because obviously it's the cleanest signal that you can get, and you don't have that problem that I had up on stage, that if your brain waves aren't exactly the way that they're meant to be, these things will pick up on stuff. And there are tons and tons of examples already of Neuralink, of paradromics, allowing, again, people that can't speak, and that are locked in, to now finally again be able to speak, right? And I do believe that that is going to be the future, simply because of how fast it is, and how direct it is, right? It doesn't rely on something else beforehand. But I also agree with you. Smart glasses, I'll give you that example, right? One of the barriers why smart glasses aren't adopted a lot is, well, because people that don't need glasses will not typically put on glasses. Okay? You and I are kind of forced to use glasses because, I guess, we have vision disabilities, right? But if I was to give these glasses to my wife or my son and say, by the way, you have to wear these all the time now, they'd probably say, is absolutely not, right? I'll wear them if the sun is really, really bright, but
Yeah.
that's about it, and then immediately take them off again. So
I get why they do that, but it has been frustrating for me and probably for you, is that they come out with these smart glasses, and then they're usually, oh, but you can't get prescription in them.
that's right.
You're like,
I know that's
yeah, but
exactly
that's what I want
that's
to
always
have.
the thing. But
Yeah.
I believe that brain computer interfaces will also eventually get there, right? And I do believe that, again, we'll probably see this in certain professions first. Chris, with your aviation background, right? And I do mean this. What if you, and if you remember? Oh boy, now I'm really going back. If you remember, there's a Clint Eastwood movie. I forget what it was, but he steals a plane from the Russians. This is, oh boy, back like in the 80s. You remember that
Yeah,
movie?
I do remember it. He's a
That's right.
MiG, right?
And by
Yeah.
the way, he had a brain computer interface that he basically had to put on. I do believe that. Well, let me be very clear. I do not believe in that movie. Let me clarify. Absolutely not. But I do believe that for certain interaction, with technology, a brain computer interface will surpass eventually, your hands as the interface, or voice as an interface, or other things like it, right? Because it's a much faster link, directly into your brain.
Yeah, I do remember that movie. It was ahead of its time for that, but hey, it was Clint Eastwood.
Exactly.
Well, you mentioned NVIDIA's work here. What role does NVIDIA play in this space?
We are still the leaders in all of the AI inferencing infrastructure, and all of the tools that go along with it, right? We are very, very specialized tools in for healthcare, and for all sorts of different types of areas like that. So I do see a continued interest and differentiation, both from the hardware, and being able to run a lot of these more advanced workloads. Now, let me be clear. They'll pass down, right? They'll pass down into the lower devices, like, again, a smartphone at some stage. But that high end GPU, or DPU, or whatever else is up at the big top, is still going to be the one, that the workhorse that does things. And then, by the way, what's also important is the entire infrastructure that goes beyond it, right? And again, Chris, I'll give you another example of what the Scott Morgan Foundation is doing right now, being able to analyze speech, not necessarily clear speech like what I'm hoping that I'm speaking right now, but speech from somebody who has a disability. They may not be able to articulate the vowels the same way. They may, by the way, have had a stroke and not be able to speak in the same way. Right? This is now going beyond ALS, and so their speech pattern has changed, but what they're trying to say is still the same. And so again, I can apply machine learning algorithms, and I can apply algorithms then in order to be able to have somebody still do voice detection and still be able to speak in their natural voice, and everybody else being able to understand them. And by the way, then translate all of that, let's say, into Japanese and Chinese and German and everything else like that. And really, you know, I hope that everybody sees that. That's basically NVIDIA's big strength is really covering all of the different aspects, from the hardware into all of the services and then into all of the specialized software that goes above it.
So, Thorsten, you mentioned AI for good. How is AI forging the future for good?
We're focusing a lot on ALS. ALS is, I mean, while it's a very, very devastating disease, it's not really something that everybody has. It's not something, maybe you'll know somebody that has it, or something else like that. But there are many, 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 many other areas of disabilities that AI can help with, right? And really, it really depends on what the different areas are. And I can use those as different examples of projects, by the way, that I've worked on. And by the way, Chris, again, that your team was also involved in with me on some of these things. So, for example, camera technology and AI has gotten to a stage where it can simply use, and I'm going to get closer to the screen now, it can simply use micro movements of the surface of my skin in order to be able to detect heartbeat and to be able to detect blood pressure, for example. Yes, that is something that is possible. It's been proven. And by the way, there are medical grade devices that actually do it. So, if I have high blood pressure, if I have something else like that, that is would be one. It's a very, very simple application, by the way. And remember that heart disease and heart attacks are one of the leading causes of death, right?
Mm.
So, that's one of those things. But even PTSD, right? I work with a PTSD colleague who would occasionally just freak out, right? And there was something that happened in the environment that would freak out. And again, something again that we worked on was to be able to use, for example, the haptic feedback of your touchpad on your laptop. And so if it detected that you were about to freak out because your heart rate was going, nuts, then it would basically vibrate the touchpad and the surface of your laptop in relaxation rhythms to help you, and by the way, to help you reduce your PTSD and help you reduce your anxiety. Your standard prosthetics, still don't allow you to. While they're great, they don't allow you to participate in all of life in the same way, right? Getting upstairs is difficult. All sorts of other things like it. And again, some of the things that I've seen is where people are now leveraging AI and teaching the prosthetics how a human walks, and therefore also allowing the joint movement and the leg movement to be natural across running, walking, going upstairs, et cetera, right? So AI for good, while I'm only involved in a very, very small part of it, which is obviously focused on augmentative communication, AI for good for me is really to have everybody, regardless of their disability, regardless of their ability to participate in normal activities, be able to leverage AI in order to be able to thrive. That is the thing that's really the most important.
So I agree with you, Thorsten. There is a lot of potential, I believe, in AI. AI is not this evil Terminator style upcoming apocalyptic future, right? There's a lot of good that can still come from AI. I think AI is going to improve all of our lives, not just for ALS patients, although it's fascinating to see the impact that it can have for those individuals, but for everyone, really. I mean, I think it's going to improve health outcomes. It's going to improve safer driving, right? Most people don't know how to drive. It's already shown that Tesla FSD is like 10 times or more, I think even higher than that, safer when it's engaged than like a human driver. I mean, there's like a 100x less accidents or something if you have FSD engaged while you're driving in a Tesla now, right? But when you,
Frustrating as hell when I'm stuck behind it at a traffic light and it goes around. There's a green light and it goes around the corner doing like 10 miles an hour. But it is safer. Yes, I agree.
yes, room for improvement, perhaps.
Did you hear about the story of the guy? That's again incredible. The guy, in order to sequence his dog's DNA, and then come up with a vaccine to target specifically his dog's cancer.
I
It
did.
was like, yeah, again, yeah,
And that's amazing because what we're going to be able to do with AI is actually tailor it for individuals, right?
yeah,
So everyone's not going to take the same blue pill or whatever, right? You're going to have a certain pill that's or a vaccine that's tailored specifically to your DNA. And like your dog example, that guy wasn't a doctor, right? He just used AI to actually create a vaccine, and then he most of the time took it was the 3 months of the time was getting it approved to be able to give it to his dog, right?
yep.
Yeah, crazy. Well, thanks, Thorsten. Super interesting. I think there is a lot more AI for good coming for all of us, and I'm here for it.
I am too. I'm really looking forward to it because Chris, you and I are just getting older, and I think we'll be using
It needs to come faster.
it.
All right, thanks, Thorsten. And for being a guest, Thorsten, I've got some crazy socks for you, circuit boards. So here you go. AI isn't just about what we can automate, it's about what we can restore. Thorsten Stremlau is showing what that future can look like. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Forging the Future for more conversations at the edge of innovation.